A powerful blend of pride, remembrance, and celebration. Streets once marked by struggle, now alive with joy, music, and unity as communities across Metro Atlanta gather to honor Juneteenth. Tonight, 11 Alive's Gilat Malamed takes us to Piedmont Park for the 13th annual Juneteenth Parade and Music Festival.
A celebration of freedom at Piedmont Park. It's something Juneteenth Atlanta Parade and Music Festival director Bob Johnson does not take for granted.
At one time, slavery existed right here on this dirt.
And this weekend, vendors, food, music, games, and more fill the park. Johnson encourages everyone to celebrate Juneteenth, marking the end of slavery in the United States.
This is important because if we don't stand for freedom, we can lose it. Not freedom for me, not freedom for you, freedom for everybody.
It's Juneteenth, the holiday marking the end of slavery in the United States. People across the country gather to mark the pivotal moment in our nation's history. You're looking at the Juneteenth Jubilee Parade in Milwaukee, one of America's oldest Juneteenth celebrations. Fort Worth honored Juneteenth with the Opa Lee Walk for Freedom. Dr. Lee began the annual tradition of marching 2.5 miles to symbolize the 2.5 years that it took for enslaved people in Texas to learn about their newfound freedom.
She's a grandmother to all of us, and I love her for what she has done for us, for just empowering the emancipation even more. So I love her for that. Thank you, Miss Oprah Lee. I look up to you. I admire her.
The 98-year-old did not walk this year because of health concerns. President Biden made Juneteenth a federal holiday when he signed the legislation in 2021 with Dr. Lee in attendance.
At 95 years young, Opa Lee shows no signs of slowing down. Her life story has become legendary for her unwavering mission as the grandmother of Juneteenth.
At what point did you decide that you wanted Juneteenth to be a national holiday?
I felt like I hadn't done enough. I was 89 years old when I got to thinking about it. I just decided.
So it wasn't until then, it wasn't until 89?
No. Mm-mm. I was old as dirt. I decided that maybe if a little old lady, 89 years old, in tennis shoes, walking from Fort Worth to Washington, somebody would pay attention.
And they did when she started Opal's Walk, trekking 2.5 miles at a time. For the 2.5 years it took for General Gordon Granger to arrive in Texas and inform enslaved black people of their freedom after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865. She delivered 1.5 million signatures to Congress, clinching victory when legislation passed last year.
The bill is passed!
It was signed by President Biden at the White House, establishing Juneteenth National Independence Day.
What do you think of when you look at that pen?
That it has done so much for freedom.
So yesterday here in America, we celebrated Juneteenth, a federal holiday that was initially put into motion by President Trump in 2020 and was signed into law by Joe Biden in 2021. So Juneteenth is supposed to commemorate the last slaves essentially being notified of their freedom through the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, growing up in Mississippi, I did not know much about Juneteenth. We didn't celebrate Juneteenth. It wasn't something that we really discussed. But I know it's something big that is in Texas, and people in Texas celebrated that every summer. And I think it's something that we should celebrate. We should celebrate the fact that America righted its wrong of slavery, that America recognized the wrong it was to enslave other human beings. And so we are thankful that the Union won the war. We're thankful that people that were enslaved were free. But the question I have is, was Juneteenth really the last day of slavery in America? Was it? Before we get to that, I want to mention that it's one thing to be free from physical slavery, but it's even more empowering when you're free from financial slavery. And one way to do that is to incorporate gold or silver or other precious metals into your retirement portfolio. To download a free resource that talks about incorporating gold or silver or other precious metals into your retirement portfolio, go to thebiblicalconservative.com/gold or click on the link in the description. So was Juneteenth the last day of slavery in America? You'll be surprised to find out it was not. Now, this is something that many of you may not know. I was not aware of all of this history until recently. Choctaw Indians and other Indians owned slaves. Yes, they did. It's the little secret that people don't want to mention. People always like to say that only white people own slaves. Black people own slaves. Native Americans own slaves. The practice of slavery was running rampant here in America and wasn't just relegated to the white man. Slave owning past remains a problem for Choctaws. The Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, whose members owned black slaves and fought on the side of the Confederacy in the Civil War, is now opposing federal efforts to require that descendants of the tribe's former slaves, called freedmen, be given promised rights before the tribe can receive federal housing funds. And move on down to here. This is what I want you to see. So, following the conclusion of the Civil War, the 5 slave-owning tribes in Oklahoma that fought with the Confederacy signed new treaties with the U.S. government. In the Choctaw Nation's 1866 treaty, the federal government promised the Choctaws and the Chickasaw Nation $300,000, an amount equal to roughly $4.8 million today, in return for the tribes making such laws, rules, and regulations as may be necessary to give all persons of African descent resident in the said nation at the date of the Treaty of Fort Smith and their descendants heretofore held in slavery among said nations, all the rights, privileges, and immunities, including the right of suffrage of citizens of said nations. You gotta understand something. Essentially, these Choctaw reservations, like many nations within America, they have their own laws and treaties and those kinds of things. That's what happened when the federal government made these agreements with the Native Americans. So they have their own, it's like their own little city, own little town, own little jurisdiction. And so therefore, the federal government had to make treaties with these people with these nations, in order to try to push civil rights for freedmen, black people that live in these nations. But this is what I want to show you right here. And like I said, I grew up in Mississippi, and I did not know this. I grew up around Choctaws. There was a county north of my home county, Neshoba County. There's a huge reservation up near Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the Choctaws have casinos and a big old water park. My family went to the water park. We didn't go gamble, okay? We went to the water park about 4 years ago. Very nice facility up there. So we played basketball with the Choctaws. I know about the Choctaws because the Choctaws didn't live too far from where I grew up in Meridian, Mississippi. And those of you who are listening, who are familiar with the East Mississippi area, you know about the Choctaw Indian Reservation. You know about the Choctaws down there. But I did not know about the Choctaws owning slaves. Brought to Indian Territory in the 1830s, black Choctaws arrived with the Choctaw Indians as slaves. Prior to removal, the Choctaws had been exposed to Africans in their native homeland of Mississippi. Slaves were a part of the European culture to which the Choctaws would later adapt. So what this is saying is that the Choctaw Indians, when they came back to Mississippi in around 1830, they brought with them slaves, black Choctaws. Slavery would be one of the institutions the Choctaw Nation, would adopt. Chief Mashula Tubi had slaves, as did many of the Europeans who married into the nation. Slavery remained in the Choctaw Nation till 1866. You see that? Slavery remained in the Choctaw Nation till 1866. This is a year after Juneteenth, or June 19, 1865. When the Treaty of 1866, that treaty that I mentioned before, signed in Fort Smith, Arkansas, requiring that the Choctaws release their Africans from bondage. See, that's that little known history that unless you dig and research for yourself, you would never have known that. I grew up in Mississippi and I did not know that. I did not know that the Choctaw Indians owned slaves, black people. That's why this whole notion of slavery, this victimization, this oppression, the white man's holding me down, it is a distortion of history. It's not telling the full picture of history. Yes, did some white people, the rich white people, own slaves? Yes, rich black people owned slaves. And so did Choctaw chiefs and the Choctaw Indians. They owned slaves because slavery was the way of life during that time. But the Marxists, the communists, and the socialists, and those who want to push this agenda of black victimization and oppression that want to separate us based on ethnicity will not tell you that truth, because they want you to be so upset with the white man that you only see white people as the ones that were perpetrating slavery. You only see the 1619 Project when white people brought slavery over here to America. And they'll say, well, it came from the white man. But why aren't you so upset with the Indians or other black people that own slaves? Because they want you to stay focused on white people so they can use your aggression, use your agitation, use your grievance against you. We must be mindful of that. We must be mindful of what we read in our history books, must be mindful of who is telling us the story and from what biases and from what perspective they want us to receive the information they're giving us. They have an agenda. Their agenda is to keep us victims. Well, we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness.